Gianni, good afternoon. I'm super excited. This is part three, kind of part four of this series, if we're including our panel episode. So I'm excited to dive into this with you.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
So
Get into some of these branding details, talk some stuff.
yeah, this is particularly exciting for me because you and I have been going through our own exercises at work with this. But so far we've talked about, setting up your business plan, your go-to market plan. We've got a baby visitor, so don't mind the baby noises.
Not at all.
But and with all of that work, right, hopefully we have gotten to a point in our development of our business, our launching of this business within 3 days, that we know really well how we are going to succinctly articulate what our business encompasses, and then enter you, right? We want to be able to then take that and apply it to all of the visual aspects of our brand.
Exactly, which is a main thing of what it's kind of sums up what branding is in a way. It's the visual representation of your company, of that mission statement, that idea. Yeah.
So talk us through your process, and what's nice is this is pretty fresh for you in respects of a project you and I have been working on. But when you're given a business or these entrepreneurs, especially if they're not necessarily design-oriented individuals, what sort of thought processes, exercises can they go through to start thinking okay, this is how I'm articulating in words. What are my first steps to begin to translate that visually?
Well, one of the first and most important steps is understanding the business goals and the kind of brand personality. Is it a tech company like Weave? Is it an outdoors company? Does it have to do with food or entertainment, something like that? So it's kind of understanding that kind of personality of the brand and what the goals are, and that also is going to help you kind of bake into the visual identity that you come up with those kind of characteristics that coincide with whatever those goals and ideals are. So it's a lot of just really understanding, like those goals and those kind of things about the brand.
Yeah, and knowing and I think a lot of us underestimate innately how much we can figure that out. That we know that certain colors evoke certain emotions, and that we know certain directions of lines or shapes or certain things like that.
Right.
It's all human language, universal language. A red octagon means stop, no matter what white letters are written on it.
Yeah.
And that we can tap into that even though we may not be professional designers.
Yeah, because one of the main things is, even if you're not a professional designer, one of the things that is really going to have an effect on your brand is if you're designing things that are intentional, to get a point across, like everything from the visuals to the kind of typography that you choose to the visual elements and the photography is a choice, and it's a choice that even if it's very subtle, it's going to affect the overall picture of that brand. It has a huge effect on it. So that's kind of like where you should be starting. You shouldn't be looking at it as let's just make some pretty pictures that people that are easy to look at, that are pleasing. It should have, it should have, it should be something that is intentional and have a purpose. I guess that's what I would say.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. It should, because we all know the phrase, a picture is worth 1,000 words, right?
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
And as much as it might be easy to grab a template or an unsplash photo or this or that and throw something together really quick, I think we need to also be careful about about not doing that too fast, about sitting down, taking some time, and like you're saying, I like the word you're using, being intentional about it, because a lot of times that first impression is all we get. And visuals, the things where our visuals come into play, our website, an ad, that's when you talk about people interacting with you in your business, you've got like 7 to 10 touches where they need to be exposed to before they might purchase with you.
Right.
And those are crucial. And your visual branding it's imperative that you get it right so that you pull them in, but not just pull them in, but resonate with them.
Yeah, and that's very true. But it's important to remember that, I mean, if you are trying to expedite this process and really get something moving, like in a short period of time, that not everything is going to be perfect, but you can still follow these steps of like, doing this research on business goals and brand personality and other things, and kind of like minimize the time that you would normally spend on them. Just kind of delegate, maybe I would spend, if it normally takes me like 2 hours to do some research or something like that, or write out a statement of like key points that I'm trying to hit, maybe cutting that down to an hour or 45 minutes, just to get a head start, just to get something out there and kind of get the ball rolling so you hit the ground running,
Yeah. Well, and with that, right, it's okay. And we're launching in 3 days. We're kind of being scrappy here.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's okay to launch with something that ends up getting changed. Still be intentional, right? And have something that really does represent your brand. But so many companies end up going through rebrands. So if you don't get it right, it is not the end of the world.
Yeah. Like often there's so many times when it's not right the first time. It's just to get something out there, like get some exposure. Yeah. So another really good, another step in the process is market and user research, and that's understanding your competitors, like your competitors on the high and the low end, like what kind of companies that are in the same genre, like which ones are really successful, what are they doing, where are their products sold, what do they look like, what's the differences between ones that are on the lower end, like what are the difference in the visuals between those, those kind of things. So market research, it can be super helpful to kind of look at those things and learn from those experiences.
Yeah. So as we've established our research, not just in terms of our specific market, but in terms of, competitors and customers, but maybe even like just traditional logos, big companies like UPS, FedEx, Apple, IBM, you see all these very iconic logos, brands, Spotify. What are some of the things people do need to establish in order to launch their business in their first 3 days? What are some of the assets that they should focus on designing?
When it comes to design, so you're going to need your logo. You're going to have to kind of make some choices as to how big of a part, like photography, other graphic elements, maybe there's illustration incorporated into there. You're going to have to narrow down a typeface or like a set of typefaces that you want to stick to. And you're also going to need a set of, like collateral materials. You're going to need, if you can put together a website, like that's something, even if it's very minimal, just to get something out there so you have that ease of exposure. But, business cards and like a letterhead, those kind of collateral materials are, super important as well.
Yeah, so let's dive into a few of those. The first one you mentioned was your logo. What recommendations do you have when people are designing a logo?
When you're designing a logo, look around, and the first thing is understanding like what that company is. Is it corporate? Is it a startup boutique? Is it or something organic? You know, because all of those are going to have an effect on how kind of like how it's perceived and how the overall visual comes together. Because you know, you can have a little bit more freedom with a logo that is a little bit more artistic and organic, you know, for a company that represents those values. You know, if it's like some kind of small, like more artistic boutique type rather than, you know, a corporate brand like FedEx or UPS or
Yeah.
you know, Walgreens and stuff like that. You know, it just affects the way it looks. So once you understand that, just look around. You know, like look for inspiration. Like what inspires you. Pinterest is excellent. You know, you
Yeah.
can spend like way too many hours just, you know, I swear, like when I start doing my research, I have a web browser open and I keep getting deeper and deeper, like into these tabs and folders of saving stuff. And it's like this huge mess, you know, you got to kind of
Yeah.
like pull in the reins, but yeah, just look around, you know, and your ideas and stuff like that will start to click. And, you know, just start doing, it's been very helpful for me. Like when I first started my design career, I was very particular about certain things. So when I would design a logo, I would sit there and I would just kind of nudge and mess around with like two options and try to get them perfect. And really what I was supposed to be doing was just a bunch of different things, like all over the page quickly, you know, and just kind of seeing, like getting a bunch of stuff out there, you know, and
Yeah.
kind of blowing things up and then kind of refining things as I would go along, you know, like in a very minimal amount of time. So it's a lot of experimentation when it comes to that. And you
Yeah.
have all these things and then you kind of narrow them down to like maybe 10. And you look at those 10 and you narrow them down to 3 and then eventually you'll hit 1, you know, and
Yeah, it's so important to iterate here. Um, and just for like an exercise, just for an idea of something you can work on, there's this exercise called 30 circles, I believe is what it's called.
is it?
And
Okay.
you have, I want to say 30. That seems like a lot now.
It
30
does.
circles on like a single regular sized printer page. And you time yourself for 2 minutes and you see just how many things you can doodle into the circles. Now, this is typically done for just a creative exercise. And you could probably tweak it here to say, okay, I'm going to specifically only draw those things that I feel like are applicable to my business goals, what I'm trying to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's nice because you are restricted in two ways. You're restricted to a circle and you're restricted in time.
Yeah.
And those things really kind of help actually activate your creativity. And then from there, like you're saying, like maybe you pick one or two and then start to iterate. And you'll be amazed at the things you come up with, even though you don't have a design background and maybe you've never thought of yourself as a creative artistic person.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you try it or
No, I haven't done it yet.
you just know?
Um, I read about it as an example for like a corporate executive training thing.
Oh, I like it. And
Yeah.
that's not like the first time that I've heard about. I think it was an exercise. This was like a long time ago, but it was an exercise in school that
Yeah.
we had to do, but I think we had a little bit more time. Like
Yeah.
maybe it was 30 and we had like you know, maybe we spent like an hour.
Yeah.
And it was fun and it had a, you know, it was effective, but I think some kids cheated because some of them were like some of them were like way too good. I'm like, come on. I know there's no way that you just spent an hour on that, but
They're just way too concerned with
they
their
were just missing the point.
no, and and to that point, right? You iterate and iterate, and I think one thing to call out too with logos is simplicity, because
Yeah,
logos have to be scaled for so many different uses.
exactly. Yeah. And it's going to make a difference whether, you know, like a lot of businesses, you know, you have this wide range of different mediums. Like you go from, you know, print to things that are created for events to just like an online presence, but there are also identities that are created like mainly focused on like just an online presence, you know? So that kind of changes the dynamic of like how that's designed, you
Yeah.
know? And like you said, it's a lot about simplicity, you know, and there's also a lot of experimentation, like experimenting. What does it look like when it's like huge? What does it look like when it's really small? You know, like how are they gonna be able to see it? How can they, you know, is it gonna be memorable and recognizable
Yeah.
and
Which is
stand
huge.
out?
You need to really think about that. It's something that Maria talked about in her episode of awareness, brand recognition, right? Like
Yeah.
Apple's Apple is super simple, super scalable, but most importantly, recognizable. You know exactly what brand it is when you see it.
You know, and it's clever, you know,
Yeah.
like it has that little clever, like that bite taken out of the apple and stuff like that. So a really minimal logo that has just like a small nod to something subtle or clever, you know, just like a little nuance is
Yeah.
super effective, you know, because we
Yeah.
think it's so complicated, but really simplicity can also be so powerful. You know?
Yeah. It's almost like letting yourself go back to your inner child. Like maybe even as you're working on logos, sit down with your kids, your nieces, nephews, whoever, and be like, hey, you want to doodle with me? And look over their shoulder.
Exactly. Yeah.
See how they're portraying things because they always do it simply.
Yeah. And that's the thing is like when you look at a lot of Apple's like marketing materials, that kind of like leads into the next point of like those other visuals,
Yeah.
you know, because you go through those steps and then you know, you have these choices to make about photography and typography and other visual elements and whether there's, you know, illustration or art involved in those
Yeah.
things. But when you look at that apple, you know, and we're talking about how minimal it is, like a lot of their design materials and their marketing materials are very like they're modern and they're clean and simplistic, just like that apple, you
Yeah.
know. And that's kind of why everyone always starts with, you know, you start with the logo first. And once you start to dial that in and really nail that down, there's other stuff that kind of builds out of it. It's
Yeah.
kind of like this guiding thing, you know, that will help direct like the rest of this visual identity, you
Yeah.
know, because if the logo is if it's something for like an outdoors company and it's a little bit like rough and rugged, you know, it's like the rest of those elements should kind of reflect that same idea, you know, that
Right.
visual presence.
Right. And you kind of are hitting on a point that I really want to touch on too, and that is uniformity and consistency. And that, like, you know, if we're going to take the time to be intentional with our design and with our branding,
Yeah.
we need to be consistent. And that's why, like, maybe up front, especially if we're still going to remain in this 3-day time block, maybe it's a whole afternoon. But that's okay because you're to talk about something else our team at work has been talking about,
Yeah.
you're thinking upstream
Yeah.
as
Okay.
opposed to you're being proactive instead of reactive,
Yeah.
and allowing yourself to think, okay, what are the implications here, and almost kind of lets you be or brings out the dreaminess in you for your business at large, because then
Yeah.
like, okay, if it's this now, what do I want it to be? And how can I make sure to still leave room within my design for it to be applicable then, which then gives you like staying power too.
It's the strength of those. It's the strength of this overall brand that you create, because you'd really be surprised, like if you really are focused on just making stuff that is pleasing,
Yeah.
you're not like you know you're not giving it those legs like to stand on. Like if you build something that is flexible, you know, like it's something that can last for a long time and grow,
Yeah.
you know. So if you kind of keep that in mind, like you have this idea and you're like, you know, you have this idea for a visual or something like that that pairs really well with the company and with this brand, you know, like how far can that be stretched, you know? Because maybe it just looks awesome like right away, but it's not something that you can see kind of branching off into all these different things, you know, and kind of evolving a little bit. So that's
Yeah.
always important to keep in mind.
Well, and to that point, right, you're probably, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your design process. Well, actually, I'll just come out and ask you, like, do you start with black and white then with all of your designs?
I always do. Yeah. And sometimes people say stuff like they're like, I remember doing, when I first started at Weave, like doing something for Jake, like some logos, and just having him say, with the first round, you know, he was looking at him for the first time, and the first thing he said is, "Where's the color?" And I was like, well, I don't want you to focus on the color right now because I don't want it to affect like the way you see these, you know, because at its most basic, it's going to have to work in black and white, you know, like it's going to have to work in those two colors, and it's going to have to be strong in those two colors. And then you can sort of, then once you choose it, you can start to play around with like how color plays in, you know?
Yeah.
You always want to see it in black and white first, or just like a dark and a light color or something like that, you know? Like you don't want color to kind of muddy up the, you know, how people are looking at it right away.
Yeah. So, well, and with that, what are your thoughts or recommendations around incorporating letters or the name of the company, or even having your logo simply be the name of your company just in a certain typeface?
It just depends. It depends on if it works or not. Like if your company has a small, you know, it's like a small, like little cute title to it or whatever, it can work very well in a typeface. If you have a company that has like this really long name, you're probably gonna want to avoid that, you know?
Yeah.
And
again, the scalability. Yeah.
You have to play around with it. Like you have to look at the words on the page and kind of see, how does it look when it's just laid out flat? How does it look when it's stacked? You know, like is one word really short and the other's really long? Is it going to leave room for, like, how does the mark, if there is a mark for it, like how does that fit in? You know, like do they play well together? How does it look on the, you know, the corner of a page or like the corner of a screen? You know, like does it feel comfortable or does it feel awkward, you know? So you look at those things, you know, you look at maybe it's just a mark, or maybe it's a logo type with just typography, or maybe they work really well together, you know, and they can be used separate in certain instances.
Okay, so let's say we've got our logo designed. It works well in black and white.
Yeah.
We've picked out maybe a few colors that coincide with that feeling and the emotion we're trying to communicate. I think that's the biggest thing you're trying to accomplish with color, yes?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Well, color is like, you know, you want to, it depends on what it's trying to do, like what its brand trying to be. Is it trying to be loud? Is it quiet? And it also goes with like, what is your target audience? You know, are they old? Are they young? Is it mostly female? Is it mostly male? You know, do you want it to just be like neutral so that it kind of has this nice balance to it? So all those things affect your color choices, and color can be very, you know, it can be tricky and take a lot of testing.
Yeah.
You know? Like sometimes you'll choose a color palette, and then later along the line, you just kind of have to tweak one or two of them, you know, bump it up a little or take it down a notch to get it to work right.
Well, so with that, how many colors do you recommend? Primary, secondary, highlights?
It just depends. I mean, it could be from 3 to, you know, like a primary color could be something like 2, you know, like 2 colors, and then you'd have a secondary ones, maybe you have like 4 secondary, you know. It just kind of depends on what it is, really, you know.
Yeah. Okay. But always make sure to write down your hex codes.
Oh yeah, that's like super important, is always like a hex code and like a, like a Pantone color and like
Yep.
CMYK and all those kind of things and RGB and everything.
Write down all of them.
Yeah, all this kind of stuff develops in the style guide when you start putting that together.
Yeah. So we've got our logo. We've found out how it works in different sizes, different locations, all that jazz. We've got our color palettes, typefaces. Any thoughts on typefaces, where people can go to find a good one? What sans serif?
So there are so many. I'll tell you, like before I really started, as I had a background in illustration. So when I started even before I started studying design, when I had to choose a typeface, it was a nightmare. There were so many of them, and I was looking.
So many.
And it almost would drive me crazy. So what I use is one of the main places I look, and it's really fun because you get to see a lot of like cool branding examples, but you also get information on all these typefaces. It's called Fonts in Use.
Okay.
It's a web page.
Yep.
And you get you can pick like your industry, all the way from advertising to fashion to software and food and anything. So you get to pick your industry. It has a list of typefaces that are most popular and stuff like that. So you make those choices, and then it shows you companies that use those fonts, so you can sort of get an idea of
what it looks like.
Some ideas, some ideas of like, what do people in the entertainment industry gravitate towards? Fashion and beauty stuff is a little bit more like elegant at times. There's a whole different set of fonts for that, styles that go with certain things. So fonts in use is very good. And then just looking up online, like certain, like best, font houses, that have their own collection of fonts that they create, and you'll get a list of those that have some really good selections also. So
cool.
Yeah.
That's a cool tool, because you can very easily get overwhelmed. I mean, you even just look at our options in Google Docs or Microsoft Word, and it's like, I don't know.
and enjoy it. Like, enjoy looking at those options and making a choice that you want to work with. You know? Also, very important to understand, like, I always like to have like a large font family. Like if I choose a typeface, I like to have a large variety of weights, like at my disposal, like a list of stuff. Even if I don't use all of them, like even if I only use like a light, medium, and a bold, I like to have those choices, because again, it gives the brand legs and strength and flexibility, just like those visuals that you choose to use.
Yeah, I think that's a really good call out. And I like that you called out that site already kind of helps you narrow things down based on whatever your business or industry is. Okay.
Very cool.
There's something else I was going to ask you.
One thing I was going to say is that, like, doing this in like a limited amount of time, there's so many different things. Like, even if you're not like, you want something designed, or you have a little bit of design experience, like ask people, like reach out to people. Maybe you know somebody that loves to do logos, and they're like, they can do them in a short amount of time, and you've seen their work, reach out to them. If you know somebody that can do quick illustrations, put some feelers and stuff like that out and do that. And if it comes back lacking, like if people can't help you, there are things online. Like there's a ton of free websites for really nice, natural looking stock photography. Like one of them is Unsplash. There's one called Pexels, and I'm sure there's, probably a handful of other ones. iStock and Shutterstock, if you need illustrations, you can get some pretty, like, just like kind of custom looking, tailor-made stock illustrations there that you can still manipulate and things like that in Photoshop or Illustrator. you can kind of pull resources from there and end up with something in 3 days that looks like pretty professional.
Yeah. Well, and even to that point, right, there are even tools like 99 Designs where you can crowdsource a logo design if you don't want to sit down and think about it.
That would be perfect.
And you send out your qualifications and you get several designs back from several different designers. There's, I believe it's called Canva. That I think I'm misremembering, but I'll put it on the blog. Canva, that has pre-built things and color palettes where you can start to play around digitally if you don't feel comfortable with a pen and paper. And then it allows you to save it as well and then export it even as a PNG, which just means the background's transparent so you can put it on things, right? There are a lot of things like that that you can utilize. Yeah,
and just remember, like, it's good to, one of the most helpful things for me whenever I start a design is to kind of, because I have all this stuff in my head, like I have these ideas that are really crazy sometimes, and I want them, like I want to put them down.
Yeah.
And I kind of have to stop myself and start putting down like what works, like sort of weeding out what won't work, and start with something that is almost like, I know that this one will work. I know that this is something that is appealing, that people would like, and then make like a few other options that are just for you, like variations off of it, because you never know.
Are all of your designs just super eccentric, Gianni, and I just don't know this?
There's other stuff that's out there besides what you see at Weave, so yeah.
Yeah, no, I like that. So one last thing I want to touch on is kind of diving a little bit deeper into a style guide. We'll link to like a template of things that you should be recording, thinking about, keeping track of, so that you can very easily have that uniformity as you move past these 3 days of launching your business.
Yeah.
But and some of them we've already mentioned, right? Like your logo, thinking about placement, spacing around it, sizing, different variations that are okay, variations that aren't okay, your typefaces, your color palette, but also things like, especially in these first 3 days, you can work on templatizing your design for different channels, for social media, for email. What are your thoughts or suggestions, your approaches on designing those things?
So one thing you can do to kind of expedite and make good use of your time, like while you're developing this brand identity, and it's something that I did with We Connected. I was designing options at sizes that I knew would be used.
Yeah.
I was designing things that were like, a square for Instagram, a banner for Facebook, like what this thing would look like how it plays out like on a screen, like a tablet or like a desktop screen.
Yeah.
So kind of already making those, and then you kind of have a set of things already that you can drop into that style guide, that are already formatted. So you just kind of have to then create stuff based off those.
Yeah. And we'll link to a resource that kind of has all of these sizes and recommendations, all of the things you should be considering when designing, because you can do that. You can do that heavy lifting up front. Say, this is what it's going to look like when I post on Instagram, when I, and think through like maybe a couple different types of postings, right? Things that you and I have learned as we've connected, right?
Yeah.
Our episode highlights, but also like quotes from our guests, right?
Yeah.
Think through like just a minimal amount, 2 to 3 maybe, of each of those things for these types of assets you want to make. Create it up front, and then as you move forward, it's going to be plug and chug, which, I mean, your future self will thank you for all day long.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're also, and this is something to keep in mind, I know 3 days like isn't a lot of time.
Yeah.
Think about all this stuff, but you should be thinking about something that can be easily used by other designers. Are they
Yes.
going to, is this something crazy that takes a lot of knowledge
Yeah.
and time and effort, or is this something that it's like giving someone like a kit of parts and they can easily just like put things where they need to,
Yeah.
and the style
Like,
guide is going to help them with that, like they should be able to understand. Like if you've created something that's easy to work with, they should be able to get everything they need from that style guide, and
yeah, without a lot of back and forth. Because if you do get to like cross your fingers, hope and pray, but
yeah,
like you're gonna get to the point where you're thriving, you're doing a great job, but if your design is such, like what you're saying, that there is a lot of back and forth between you and a future designer because you've gotten to that point where you can
you're gonna have
take
to
that off your plate. Say that again.
You're gonna have to take time explaining it to them, and that's the thing you mainly want to avoid is.
Well, that's money you have to spend.
Yeah.
Right? As opposed to being able to clearly articulate things, keep them simple, make it flexible. Yeah, I like that call out.
And like style guides, they can get really complicated. Like when you look at style guides, look at what's out there, but don't like, especially if you're starting this in 3 days, don't look at like, I wouldn't recommend looking at Apple's or like NASA's style guide or a big company, because they get into all these details that are not necessary right away.
Yeah.
Have fun with it. Look at it, have fun, make it an expression,
Yeah.
like, have fun with it, just because it can be something that you enjoy doing.
Yeah.
It is technical, but it can be fun.
Yeah. I was gonna say, what was that? I'm supposed to have fun?
Yeah, while you're doing it.
I know, right?
That's the whole point.
I know. It's let your creative spirit soar.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. I think this has given a really good foundation for people to go after within these 3 days. A lot to consider. And I do think, I'm going to repeat it again because I think it's really important. We'll sketch out a rough 3-day timeline too, of like what we might recommend in terms of where you spend your time to get this business up and running in 3 days. Mm-hmm. But I almost want to say like, a full afternoon on this, because you get this right as much as possible the first time you're launching a business. Yeah. And it can serve you really well for a really long time with minor tweaks.
And it'll also get your mind going. It makes it real. Like once you just started, it makes it real. Like, I'll never forget, there's a picture of like Jeff Bezos when before Amazon was even a real thing, when he was just selling books, and he's at his desk in an attic at his house, and he just has a banner next to him that's just spray painted Amazon.
Spray painted?
And that's all it was. It was just like, that's the name. It's it's a thing. And now, now look at like what it looks like and their materials and stuff. So just get started,
Yeah, no, I like that. It's a common thread across so many of these conversations. Just move, set that timer for 10 minutes, start folding that laundry, and before you know it, 30 minutes has gone by and the laundry's done.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'll feel better, you'll feel good about it. Like you have, like you've started some groundwork. So
yeah, it's daunting to think about, but the moment that pen touches that paper, or your mouse touches that template in Canva or whatever medium you use to try starting this, it immediately gets less difficult. We sometimes freak ourselves out and are our own worst enemy.
It's absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks, Gianni.
Yeah, thank you, Casey. Yeah, this was fun. Good talking to you.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to that episode of We've Connected. Make sure to hit subscribe down below so you get notified of any time we add a new episode.
We'll catch you next time.